I'm Wyatt Cash at Scoop News Group, and we're here at the HPE Public Sector Summit on Digital Transformation with Dan Fallon, Senior Director of Systems Engineering at Nutanix Public Sector. Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let me start by asking, how has the federal government made progress in the recent year on its goals for digital transformation from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the obvious element there is the COVID pandemic, probably the answer many give on this question, but that has really compressed a huge amount of digital transformation in a short amount of time. So it's forced things like telework, work from anywhere, work from any device to become front and center. But at the same time, meeting those goals of more mobility for the workforce and in transforming the end user and device digital transformation, that's also brought about the need for more focus on cybersecurity and also the back end services that serve those users. So there's been a growing focus around cybersecurity that started at the beginning of the pandemic, but then has become even more prevalent because of some of the recent attacks and insider threat persistent attacks that have occurred. So that's been a growing focus in the transformation of enterprises across the government sector. And then I think also as the users there's this consumerization of IT trend that's been happening for a number of years, but really the pandemic brought that forward so that, all right, I can work from anywhere, I can telework. But then that same expectation, the level of services on the digital items that are delivered, not only to the workforce, but also the citizen service, things we've seen across the public sector and the COVID dashboards and all that type of new information data being delivered out to end citizens.
Well, how have agencies with missions at the so-called edge, have they been able to improve success with emerging technologies like cloud?
Yeah, that is a great question. There's this pull and push of the kind of IT trend over the years. So cloud is centralizing things, whereas edge is expanding it back out again. So those are kind of at odds with one another. But at the end of the day, what we want to do is we want to get the data that's out at the edge back into that centralized cloud environment. There are a number of benefits there, security perspective, resiliency, redundancy, and also so we can have our centralized data lakes to run intelligent look at things like AI and be able to analyze the data and have learnings from those that are then applied back out to the edge. So that edge device is more non-persistent. It may be there, but then it may go away if we're talking about edge devices in a crisis scenario responding to disaster relief or a military scenario where it's deployed and then it goes away with the mission. So that edge device, it uses cloud concepts for compute and analytics at the edge, but then that data that we need to persist gets shipped back into that centralized cloud environment. So you need a connection, a fabric that stitches that together. So it's easy to manage, and that spin up is very quick because we're doing this over and over again with how a lot of the edge enterprises operate.
Well, next, talk a little bit about the role that Zero Trust plays now in securing agencies modernize their technology architectures.
We hit on cybersecurity at the beginning, and Zero Trust is definitely the trend in how enterprises and IT organizations are meeting the threat of the persistent attacks that we're seeing, especially in the federal government. And then what I see in the state and local market is more ransomware attacks. All of them very serious in the sense that we need a plan, a proactive plan. And Zero Trust really brings a number of different technologies together into one overall architecture methodology, into the sense that you used to have this kind of, when you got into the, think of it in terms of physical security. When you got into the building, you were free to go anywhere. And people that work in highly sensitive areas know that that's been kind of changed in the sense that different rooms have locks on them if they're different types of data. And that same concept is being applied to the IT and the network level. So it's no longer just a single firewall at the perimeter, and that firewall is meant to keep all the bad guys out. We know that doesn't work. Once the bad guy gets in, the problem is they can now spread laterally throughout your network. That's what we've seen in these attacks like the SolarWinds attack. So Zero Trust is applying additional technology like microsegmentation and authentication requirements and a lot of different security technologies to ensure that if a single web server is compromised that sits on the internet, that bad guy is stuck on that server. They can't spread throughout your network, grab other data. And then there's also additional concepts that once the compromise is realized, that we're able to restore back to full operational state much quicker. And that's been some of the problems with these insider attacks and these ransomware threats, is just the amount of time to get back online. So not only being able to prevent it, but also being able to respond quickly when something happens, when an event happens.
Well, lastly, Dan, what emerging technologies are going to have the biggest impact on the government in the coming years?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot of different ways we could go with that one. I think we talked about data a little bit. I think government is really just starting to get all the data gathered together. So another trend that COVID kind of brought out, especially at the state and local level and on the healthcare side and the federal government, is we need to get all the data sets together in one single central repository. And then I think that's starting to happen. There's a lot more focus around data lakes and just unifying data so that an agency is aware of all their data, has it centrally located and can manage it. That's really happening right now at different levels throughout the federal government. And I think what we're going to see is now the next step is how do we apply AI and machine learning to those data sets. So I think we're in the very early days of that. It's a very hot area, but very leading edge. I mean, we're doing things like that in our solution where we actually have AI built in to monitor data at the infrastructure layer and respond accordingly if we see deficient resources or overuse of resources. But now the next level is how do we apply AI and machine learning tool sets to really data that's delivered out to the mission user or the civilian and user consuming those government services. And I think that's really interesting area, and we're going to see a lot more in that area over the next couple of years.
Well, Dan Fallon, thank you so much for joining us and sharing some of your insights with us.
Thank you.